Do I need 3 different Yuna cosplays? No. Do I want 3 different Yuna cosplays? Yes. You could argue that if it makes me happy, maybe it is a need. Hi, I'm Kamiko, and I am obsessed with Final Fantasy X, and that is all you need to know about me for the purpose of this video. We are making my 3rd Yuna cosplay. I've made her gunner outfit from the 2nd game, I've made her wedding outfit that she wore for a total of 6 minutes in the 1st game, and now I decided that I finally wanted to make her summoner outfit, which she wears in the 1st game. Without further ado, let me tell you how I made my Summoner Yuna cosplay. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to attempt to do is to adjust the color a little bit on this linen that I bought. It was a little too gray navy tones for me, so I attempted to bring out a little bit more purple by adding this pink. As you can see, it's a little bit vibrant in the sunlight, but once I brought it indoors, it kind of didn't really do anything, so I just left it at that. Next, I am going to add my pleats in. For my pleats, I wanted a nice full skirt, so I'm doing my pleats 2 inches away and then taking in about 6 inches of fabric for each pleat. So I'm starting off here by marking off all my pleats with tailor's chalk, and then I'm going to baste them in with pins first, so it makes sewing it a little bit easier. With all of my pleats pinned in place, next I'm going to sew these down with a straight stitch. Once all of my pleats are sewn in, because this linen was so finicky, I pinned all of the pleats closed for the start of the design. This was a little overwhelming to do, but I used a chalk marker as that was the only thing that would show up on this fabric, and I decided to freehand the design. It was a little overwhelming just because this design is so busy, but I just opened up a reference and tried my best to create the design. And then after creating the design, I opened up all of the pleats to make a continuous design as well. So as you can see here, this is what the finished result looks like, and when you open it, the design continues as well. So now we're ready to add all of the details. For starters, I used some yarn from my sister's stash, and I did a couching stitch for all of the vines. I will say some of the tighter corners were more difficult, but it took me about 2 hours to get all of this done. So here is how all of the couching looked. It honestly looks a little off in my opinion, so we're gonna have to fix that. I'm coming to you with an update, but it's not a good update. Here is the Yuna skirt so far. I have done all of the couching. As you can see, there is the chalk design that I have, and then here are all the flowers that I've made. So far, I have made about 5. The first 2 that I made didn't come out that great. Paper cutouts to try to get them more symmetrical, and they did improve. Here is how this one turned out. The other problem is that it's not really wanting to hold the pleat shape very well, and it's just turning into a nightmare and a half. I have decided to scrap the skirt idea and try again. It happens. We are going to move on and we're gonna try something else. There's no shame in that. For my second dye attempt, I decided to take some inspiration from Sweet Nyaru Cosplays on Instagram. They used a combination of eggplant and indigo Rit Dye to get the color of their Yuna skirt, so I decided to try the same. The mistake I made here is that the test swatch I used is actually a slightly different twill compared to the one that I used for the final project, so this did not turn out as deep of an indigo as the skirt that I came out with. So it did just occur to me that showing you these skirts with a blue sweatshirt might not be a good idea, but hey, what can I say? I have to be comfortable, and this is one of my favorite lounge shirts. Anyway, I wanted to show you the difference of the color. So this is the first skirt that I made out of the linen. Oh my god, it's backwards. It's backwards. So this is the color. It is much closer to the skirt payoff as Yuna, and I have not pressed this, mind you, but look at how defined the pleats are all the way down the skirt. This one is close. I just think it's a little bit too purple, and I want to try to fix some of these splotches in the fabric. Here is how the skirt turned out after re-dyeing it. This time I used just indigo and no eggplant, and it turned out perfectly. I will spare you the details of how complicated these pleats were. I attempted to do some very narrow 1-inch pleats at the start, but I actually ended up using the same 2-inch pleat that I used for the first mock-up of the skirt instead. But essentially, it's the same way. I pleated everything down and then ironed it in place with a lot of steam and extra heat. This fabric is a lot easier to draw on than the linen, so I was able to use a water-soluble colored pencil to design all of the pieces. I decided to purchase Sweet Nyaru's embroidery file, and that made drawing out the pattern way less stressful than freehanding it myself. There are 16 patterns that are split up, and the process was so much better and way less stressful than the first time I drew everything out. Moving on to the embroidery files. Now there's a setup for a hoop capacity that is too big compared to mine. So I did a couple of tests, and essentially what I came up with is I split up just the flower designs. Basically what I ended up with is one small flower design and one large flower design. The smaller one does not have the pink inner part though. Machine did not want to stitch it. If I had to describe what machine embroidering is like, I would say it's like parenting or chaperoning, because it's not like these masterpieces just get done and then you could like go sit in bed while you wait. Like, this thing needs constant watching over. Oh my god. I hate when this threader doesn't do its only job. There are 46 total flowers on Yuna's skirt, so what you're seeing is several hours of work split up over the course of 3 different days, but it was well worth the effort in the end. I'm so tired. It is 11:56. Got all the flowers embroidered. I'm going to go to bed. Okay, so I tested a satin stitch, and then I also did the cording stitch with the yarn, and it's very fuzzy. It's kind of like getting everywhere, but this one, it's got a cleaner look to it. So I'm gonna go with this one instead. While satin stitching is considered embroidery, it's really simple to do. You're just going to adjust the width of your zigzag stitch to be as narrow as you can. For getting around these tight curves, my best recommendation is just to go slow and to constantly pivot as you sew. That way you get a nice gradual curve. It's just very finicky to do. Give yourself some grace with that. Now the very last detail that we have to add are the leaves. Essentially all I'm doing is adjusting the thickness of the stitch as I'm sewing it to get a gradual point. That way I go from small to big to small, and it gives the illusion of a leaf. This is also very finicky, so just take it slow if you need to, and eventually you get a nice little leaf. Now we can finally actually finish the skirt. Here I am just sewing in the 2-inch pleats, and then I'm going to attach a waistband. The waistband gets sewed right sides together with the skirt, and then I'm going to top stitch down the waistband just for some extra security and for a detail measure. I had some extra blue thread left over from Sly Cooper, so I used that to match with the indigo fabric. Next, I am finally using a function on my machine that I never get to use, which is the button placket. I thought this would be a fun way to add a closure to this wrap skirt that I've made. And I had some heart buttons that I used for the closure. It's cute and functional. The last thing I'm adding is a pocket to this design. Essentially, I have cut open one of the pleats and then serged off the excess fabric. Then I am using some scrap fabric to make some just generic insert pockets. They get sewn right sides together with the skirt, and then the pocket bag gets sewn closed, and then you have a pocket. Okay, this is how the skirt turned out. It is super full and super twirly and super cute, and I love how the embroidery came out. This took exactly a week to make. Yay! Oh, and look at the indigo. Look at the indigo. Okay, let's move on to the next thing. Now, if you want to get any reputable information on Asian textiles, this is not the place for that. I like to do my research and try to be historically conscious when making cosplays that are literally reflective of actual clothing that people still wear to this day, like kimonos. From what I've seen, kimono sleeves are a lot shorter, rearing towards furisode territory. So I am using the Dr. Cos extra large kimono pattern, and this is specifically the one with the furisode sleeves, so it should be closer to what Yuna sleeves look like. The reason that I have to cut them out first is because kimono sleeves are like a rectangle and then they fold, so the fold seam line is on the bottom, it's not on the top. So since her gradient dye goes from pink to white, I'd have to cut the sleeve out first and then dye the bottom part of the sleeve. Now you would be advised to maybe not do this because if you mess up the dye, it's going to be right on the front of your sleeve. But I'm gonna get started assembling this pattern. My only recommendation, they have Japanese sizing. So even though it's translated into American sizing, I find I've never had a Dr. Cos pattern fit me on the first try. While I should be getting a medium for this, I got their extra large because I'm paranoid and I'd rather have more fabric and not need it than not have enough fabric and then I have to cut these out again. So I'm gonna get started and we're gonna make a kimono sleeve. After having worked with this pattern, I will say the extra large for the women's size did actually fit me. So I would recommend that you size up twice if you do decide to use this pattern for yourself. Anyway, what I am doing is cutting out the sleeves. Now, I was not able to make the sleeves as long as I wanted because of my 3-yard constraint. My sleeve is like the middle size, so it hits at about my hip instead of my knee. Anyway, the next thing we are going to do is gradient dye this. Now, I have a lot of recommendations for this. For starters, I am using the hottest water that I can get and a large enough pot for my dye, and I have also added salt to this dye to help all of the fabric adhere, and I have pre-soaked the fabric as well. As you can see, I have added a very small amount of dye to start with, and that's because you want a gradual shift and not a harsh shift. So this is how everything looks with the first initial dip. Then, as you go, you're going to add a little bit more dye. You don't want to be stiff with your fabric and hold it in one spot. You want to be constantly moving it, and that guarantees the most smooth transition of the gradient. Look at how vibrant gradient looks. It's absolutely beautiful. The next thing I do to this, and I add cold water with a mixture of white vinegar, and that really helps to lock in the color of this gradient and keep it from transferring when you go to wash it. Linen actually holds on to water more than other fabrics do. So this particular fabric had to sit out overnight in order to get this vibrant texture that would not bleed. After creating the mock-up, I was confident enough that I got the general consensus of how kimono/furisodes are constructed, so let's work on the final one. First, since this piece is unlined, I'm going to serge every single panel. That way it'll stop the fabric from fraying, especially since this piece is probably going to get washed the most out of all of the pieces for this cosplay. I hope you've noticed that there is gradient on the bodice, and I also have decided to not make her wrap top since technically she has detachable sleeves. This is because I was really inspired by the historical construction of the skirt, for example, and the obi, so I also wanted to be historical with the top. I was also inspired by the kabuki rendition of Final Fantasy X, where she has kind of like a pink kimono with a white overlay, and so I kind of did a gradient to show my inspiration for this design. We have attached the sleeves to the bodice, so now we have to sew the bodice closed. I would highly recommend, if you do make a piece like this for yourself, that you either pay attention to the directions that Dr. Cos gives you or watch a video on it, because there are certain parts of the kimono that don't actually get sewn, and that's to allow for breathability, which I think is pretty cool. Next, we are going to sew the collar to the base of the furisode. Part of this is supposed to be interfaced, but I did not have enough interfacing for this. So I only interfaced the very back, well, the very middle of the collar where it is right at the neckline, so that it has that dip that it's supposed to. Then I'm going to top stitch the collar down to the top directly. Also, please excuse if I'm not using the technical terms for a lot of these pieces. There are a lot of them to remember, and I also don't remember all of them, but feel free to do your research before constructing something like this, because the way that these pieces are constructed is just super interesting in my opinion. The last thing I'm doing is top stitching down the vents on the sleeves. I would argue this is the most finicky part of the process, so I guess if you line this piece, skip this step altogether, lucky you. The last thing I'm doing to the furisode is adding the little ribbon closures that are technically on the sleeves, but I'm adding it to the bodice to kind of show the little inspiration. I found some embroidery floss that was pretty close to the color of the skirt that I made, and I'm doing a running stitch or a lightning stitch to kind of mimic the illusion of like ribbon being fed through. And then I'm just going to cut off the excess and add some beads to this, and the piece is actually done. We out here again with the pot, the noodles, and the seasoning. When I was dyeing this piece, I literally felt like I was like dunking my hands in sewage water. Like, dyeing stuff yellow is just so gross in my opinion. Anyway, what I'm doing is dyeing the obi fabric. I have this twill fabric that I got, and I'm dyeing it with the marigold and the yellow. I will say, I said I left this in for as long as possible. I actually wish I had took it out immediately because the color ended up a little bit too dark. This was after me leaving it out there for about 30 minutes. Technically, obis are supposed to be tied in the back. You usually have to have someone help you to do this. So I decided to make a faux bow using the Cosmic Cotier pattern. That way I can assemble this obi onto myself without having extra help. I've talked a lot about the Cosmic Cotier construction in other videos, so I'm gonna lightly go over it in this video. But this is the general pattern, and then this is the measurements I used for my obi. Next, we have to add the design onto the obi. For this, I'm using a water-soluble pen, and I'm using a reference offhand to kind of get the general design that I wanted for this piece. I'm really bad at making things symmetrical, so I tried to use as many aids as I could. It still didn't come out super symmetrical, but I tried my best. Hello, sorry I look really crusty. Went up until 1 a.m. fighting with the wig, and she won. So yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about the obi because I'm deciding to shift gears a little bit. Yes, again, you can kind of see there are some spots in this. I think this is pretty close. But here's something I figured out. Obis, and the fabric is woven in a specific way that it almost is kind of like a brocade. Here's the fabric that I picked up from the fabric store. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, that's what it looks like. Laying this on that side, this on this side. That's how it's looking with this. Definitely more striking, definitely closer to the original, but I kind of like this one better. And to be fair, both colors are off from the video game design, so I don't really think it matters which one I pick because both are going to be inaccurate. So I'm mostly going for what I like the most out of the two. But yeah, I'm gonna get started on the Obi again, and let's get started with that. So what I'm starting off with is I interfaced one half of the Obi. I'm sewing it right sides together and making a tube essentially, and then I'm going to turn the whole thing inside out. I'm doing the same thing with the Cosmic Cotier bow. Also, side note, I really need to get my pinking shear sharpened. Like, look at how horribly they are cutting. I started cosplaying in 2015, so I am by no means qualified to say that I am an old school cosplayer. But this is my homage to old school cosplay. Yes, you guessed it. We're using puff paint. I feel like using puff paint is an old school cosplay rite of passage. Now, as you can see, I've learned from my mistakes with the previous design. I'm doing less shapes for the inside of the circle, and I'm finding it a lot easier to create this design this way. Puff paint is great if you do superhero cosplays, but it's also great if you want to mimic embroidery without the painstaking art of actually making the embroidery. I find that this process is a lot of fun, but if you are going to try to do the same thing as I did, I actually recommend getting some kind of syringe or funnel, as it's really hard to control the thickness of this. For a design like Yuna's vines, where it's super simple, I think it's fine, but if you're trying to do something a little bit more complex, I would recommend getting like a pipette or a syringe in order to make the process of adding this a little bit more consistent. But puff paint is cheap and it's really fun to use, so I highly recommend that you try it out. Puff paint needs to fully cure before you can touch it, so for this particular project, I actually left it out for 2 days before I handled the Obi again. But look at how great it turned out, and it didn't take me 3 days. The next thing we're going to do is finish assembling our faux Obi knot. For this, I just created an extra piece and then I'm going to hand sew this together. Next, we're going to do the little faux piece on the Obi. Technically, this is kind of like a wrap that you put underneath the Obi, but I didn't want extra layers on my cosplay. So I'm using this satin bias tape and hot gluing it to give the illusion that I did it accurately. No one will ever know. And here is how everything turned out. I think it looks super clean, and it looks just as good as if I had spent all that time sewing it. Next, I'm going to add a closure for my Obi. I thought the easiest way would just be to add Velcro. That way, it's just super easy to attach by myself. This is going to get sewn directly onto the Obi on both sides. For Obi bow, I have some safety pin closures on either side and they get connected to the Obi directly. And then for the tassel that goes over the Obi, this is just my graduation cord that I hot glued some ribbon to, and that's how it attaches on top of the Obi. Next, we are going to be working on what is called an Obi-ita. You could not add an Obi-ita to your cosplay, but I would. It helps to get that nice straight shape that is ideal for making Obis. When I looked online, most are either made out of vinyl or cardboard, so I decided to use both. I used the leftover cardboard from the puff paint packaging and then some leftover vinyl that my sister didn't need anymore, essentially to make like a casing for the cardboard. Next, I sewed the vinyl closed, leaving one side open so that I could feed the cardboard in, and then once the cardboard was in, I sewed the cardboard in permanently. Next, I am making a fabric casing for the Obi-ita. This is just made out of some gingham, but I probably should have made this out of the same fabric as the Obi. What I'm also doing is sewing a pocket onto the Obi-ita. That way I can hide my phone in there if I ever want to. Now I have 2 pockets in my cosplay. And this is how the Obi-ita closes. I sewed some Velcro to it and an elastic piece, and then it just attaches on top of the skirt but underneath the Obi. I will say this isn't the most secure closure, so you could try something else if you wanted something that isn't going to shift around too much. But for my purposes, this works pretty great. Next, we're going to be making the tassels. Technically, her tassels are blue, but I have pink graduation cord that I don't need, so I'm using that. Essentially, I am unraveling it and then using my flat iron to get the kinks and coils out of the cord. That way it'll attach nicely. And I'm using hot glue to fray check everything because I'm lazy. Next, for the large bugle beads on the cosplay, I actually just use pens. And then for all of the beads, I use the leftover ones from my sister's stash. And if you're curious, yes, she still has more. These are the pens that I use for the bugle beads. I didn't want to actually buy any because they were $16 at Michael's, okay? So what I'm going to do is essentially scrape off as much of the design as I can with some scissors, and then these just get attached to the tassel. Next, we are going to make some kanzashi. This is for the hibiscus piece that goes on top of her obi. I was too lazy to buy a 3D file of it, and kanzashi is a Japanese flower technique, so I thought it would work well for this cosplay. I'm using some leftover polyester dubioni from both my Pomni cosplay of all things, and the fabric that I didn't end up using for the peplum of my pink diamond cosplay. You can watch videos on how to make these more in depth, but I wanted to show you the sizing that I use for these. These are actually really easy to resize compared to other flowers that I've done in the past, and they're actually pretty quick to make as well. You can either hot glue all the petals together or you can hand sew them. I've tried both methods and I like how both work pretty well. The other thing I made is this little beaded piece. It is just used from floral wire and bugle beads. I hot glue it to the back of the smaller piece before I attach it to the top of the larger kanzashi. And now we have a finished hibiscus flower that is super cute and super quick and easy to make, I think. Now we are going to work on the closures. So I ended up making 3 kanzashi in total, 2 for the hair and 1 for the obi. The hair pieces, I sewed some felt backings to them and then hot glued them to the flower. And then for this flower, I hot glued on all of the cording and then hot glued on the same felt backing. This one has the same safety pin closure as the bow for the obi does as well. And here is how they turned out. Super cute. Next, let's work on the wig. This is the wig that I got from Purple Plum Wigs as a sponsor award from Hallmat last year. For lace front closures, I just cut them with pinking shears. You can use a razor. I just find that pinking shears are a little bit easier to use. What most people recommend though is that you don't cut them in a straight line. That way the hairline looks a little bit more natural. But this way, in my opinion, looks just as good as doing the razor hairline as well. Next, we are going to crimp our wig. As always, this is going to add more volume to the wig and make the fibers a lot more malleable and easier to work with. I always crimp my wigs in a vertical motion like so, and then I use my nasty ass brush to brush everything out. The other thing I will say is that this wig is very small, which is why you see those incisions at the top. Next, I am going to tease the top part of the wig. I want some super voluminous Final Fantasy bangs for this cosplay, and for shorter wefts like this, I find it easier to just crimp them, and then while they're hot, back comb them with my nasty ass brush. And this is how it looks after you tease it. Trust the process, okay? Once all of the pieces are properly teased, we are going to steam the hair up. That way it's going to give it volume so that when we lie it back down, it has super volume at the roots and holds its shape really well. While everything is drying on the roots, I'm going to go ahead and cut off the wig so that it's the proper length. I purchased this way longer than I needed, knowing that I'd have to cut it. And I like to cut my hair in the vertical motion like I'm showing here. That way it's super feathered, kind of like how Yuna's hair is, without having that blunt, sharp cut. And then I just curled the bangs and the rest of the hair at different areas, and I'm also going to spray this another time with the Got2b glue so that everything holds its shape. But look at how cute and bouncy this wig is. Okay, so this is the finished wig. I'm not sure about the bangs. Maybe they need to be curled like further this way, but overall, I actually think this color looks quite cute on me, and the wig is very flouncy. Here's the 360, somewhere here probably, or maybe I can put them, okay, yeah, I'll put them over here. Really like this color, so yay! Let's move on to the staff. I made my own design just using pieces in my house to get all of the circles and shapes, but this is a pretty easy pattern to find on Etsy if you don't want to make your own. I'm tracing everything out onto 10mm EVA foam, but maybe use a lighter color or a pencil instead of a marker like I am. Next, I am cutting everything out with a box cutter. This is a pretty hard process to do as I bought pretty dense foam that I did not realize, but the best recommendation that I can give you is just to make sure that your blades are nice and sharp. That will make cutting into the foam pretty easy, but as you can see here, I quite struggled with this process. This took forever. I cut out 2 of each design and then aligned them together. As you can see, they don't align perfectly, so I'm just going to glue this and then hopefully I can fix this up a little bit later. And here is the base of the staff that I'm going to use for the summoner staff. So what I did off camera is I glued this together. Tried to buff it up with my sander on my Dremel tool. Let's get started. Now, if you're really good at cutting EVA foam, you can skip this entire process, but me and EVA foam aren't friends, so I'm going to have to go back and do some extra work. I'm using the same box cutter and I'm making sure my blade is nice and sharp, and any of the really large pieces that are clearly not aligning together, I'm gonna cut those off preliminarily. Is preliminarily a word? Well, it is today. Once all of the larger pieces have been cut off, I'm going to take my foam clay and smooth over all of the edges of the staff. Foam clay self-levels, so it's really great if you are really rough-handed like I am, so I really like using this stuff. Once everything is coated, I'm going to go back in with my box cutter and just pull off any excess pieces. This is going to make sanding it with my Dremel tool when it fully cures a lot easier. Here is how everything looks once it was fully dried, and I'm also going to take this outside with the Dremel tool off camera. Next, I am working on the staff. I'm deciding to use this painter's tape since it's pretty close to the color of her staff, and I'm going to wrap it in a spiral motion to give it a little bit of texture but also save on the tape since this stuff is expensive. There is an incision in the middle of the staff so it separates, so anywhere that there's excess tape, I'm going to cut that off with my scissors. Okay, so I just finished doing the pleather for the handle of the staff. I basically did it in the same spiral motion as the washing painter's tape. The painter's tape. I just did it with pleather and then I hot glued everything in. I also added a hole to this so that we can put the bell in. and I thought I would stop and show you guys this. This is what my sister and I joke is BBL Cat Noir, for obvious reasons, and I was like, oh, there's a bell on this, so why don't I just use this bell for Yuna? Because I've had this keychain for like 2 years, so you know, I don't need it because I don't cosplay Cat Noir anymore. Okay, so basically I just took some extra length off of this, and now we have a bell on the staff. Hooray! Okay, so this is how the staff looks. I think it looks super cool. I think the bell might get annoying. The bell might have to, the little thing might have to come out the bell, but so far it's nice, but with bells, they can quickly travel down to annoying town very quickly. The only thing is that I left this part completely blank. This is going to be where I put the staff portion on. I didn't film sanding it just because it is very cold outside and I want to get back inside as fast as possible. So basically all you need to know is I used the 2 standard bits that came with my Dremel tool to bulk down the foam clay and then to smooth it out. And then I used Plastidip to spray paint, like to prime the EVA foam piece. Now I'm working with less than half a bottle of Plastidip. I'm going to recommend that you coat it at least twice, but I usually coat my props 3 to 4 times before I spray them with the final sealant. There's actually a funny story to this prop. I actually bought it for my Cat Noir cosplay at a cosplay yard sale for 20 bucks. And the previous owner already went through the work of like painting the staff. So for a lot of this, I didn't really have to prime it before I painted it, which is nice. I decided to go with painter's tape for the blue part of the staff. 1, because I'm lazy, but 2, I thought it would be a nice texture to have like this instead of paint, because this is how it looks with all of the mediums together, and I feel like that's just a really cool payoff. But I think it's super cool that we've come full circle. There's pleather, the same pleather is on my old Yuna cosplay, and the new pleather, well, the same pleather is on my new Yuna cosplay. So yeah, basically what we're gonna do now is, now that the Plastidip layer has dried on my prop, we can take this out to paint, and then hopefully we can just paint it, seal it, and then attach it to the new prop. Hopefully. If anything else goes wrong, then I just lied to you right now. But I hope I'm not lying, and I hope we can just make this a simple last part of this project. So here lies my mistake. I actually used a very small amount of Plastidip as I was too lazy to go back to the store. But this is not enough Plastidip to get a clear, even coat for the staff. So at some point I will have to go back to the store and buy another can. But with this, the staff and the rest of the cosplay is done. So let me show you the finished result. Something I was not expecting with this build is how quickly it actually got done. This cosplay, despite all of the issues I had with it, only took around a month to make. I will say it's definitely less complex than some of the other builds I've made, like Pink Diamond or Rosa Not Miku, but it was no easy feat by any means. Some takeaways from the cosplay. Currently, I don't really have any. To be fair, I haven't actually worn this cosplay to a con yet. This one is planned for MomoCon, which is why I added like pockets in it and made it breathable and all that stuff, but I haven't actually worn it to MomoCon yet because it's not MomoCon. So I can't really say if it's like con proof, but from my like 8 times wearing it in my room and outside, I find that it's pretty comfortable, and I have not yet needed to consider doing any alterations to it or any like troubleshooting to it so far. I think it's a huge step up from my Summoner. I think it's a huge step up from my Gunner cosplay, but to be fair, I did make that one literally 4 years ago, so I'd hope that is a step up. I will say, I think the only thing that I'm not as proud of is maybe the staff, but I think that has more to do with the issues I had priming it before painting it. I think if the priming situation came out better, then I would have been more happy with the outcome. And I do plan on priming it and repainting it before MomoCon. We'll just see if that actually happens. But what I am currently working on right now is the Love in Deep Space cosplay from, Scarlet Passion from Love in Deep Space is currently being made. It is currently sitting on my mannequin as we speak. That's the first one. And the second one that I'm technically not supposed to be making, but I couldn't help it. Isn't it cute? I am making the 2025 Symphony Miku. I have been eyeing this cosplay for about 2 years now, and I had no intention of making it this year. But unfortunately, when I was buying fabric for Scarlet Passion, I saw like everything that I could possibly need to make that cosplay, and I went. And the other thing is that if I make that cosplay, I can make her drill curl wig, which is something I complained that I didn't update when I didn't film it when I remade my Rose Not Miku one. So I'm just saying, it's all coming together, if you will. If you got to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for stopping by to my little corner of the internet, and I hope you enjoy your stay here. And as always, I hope you, yes, you have a wonderful day.